Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David. This is Alfonso, and together we are Team augGi. Today, we're presenting something slightly different from what we started with 6 months ago when we began IDEA². And thanks to the IDEA² mentorship, in particular to Arthur here, right here in the room, and to our external mentorship as well, we now think that augGi can be the ideal partner, companion app for patients who suffer from irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. So let me begin with a story. This is Jane. Jane is a young and busy professional, but her day at work is affected by the discomfort every time she eats something. This has been happening for a while, so she wants to seek the help of a doctor. She goes to the doctor, and after a few tests, she gets a diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And the doctor goes on to say that this condition is chronic, and that the best course of treatment is to understand how lifestyle choices affect her symptoms and to change those with care. But that this might take a long time to figure out. Jane is not alone. In fact, 10 to 15% of the worldwide population suffers from IBS, and this is probably a conservative estimate. IBS impacts quality of life in several levels. At the emotional level, it can cause anxiety and depression, the social level and professional level as well, as we saw with Jane, and not to mention the high healthcare costs and utilization. In terms of treatment, there are some medications reserved for the more severe cases. And what's really important to understand is that each IBS patient is unique in how their lifestyle affects their symptoms. So it's very important to understand that relationship. So currently, patients use paper journals or apps, smartphone apps, to track how lifestyle affects symptoms. However, these tracking tools are inefficient. They're just glorified Excel spreadsheets that are subjective to patient reports. They're hard to use. They involve a lot of manual input. And most of all, they don't provide actionable insights. In fact, a lot of surveys confirm that patients are frustrated by the lack of actionable insights. We think we can do better. Introducing augGi. So augGi is basically a 3-step process: track, learn, and recommend. So on the first part, the tracking, we want to allow to track symptoms in a much easier way. In fact, we've been working on a computer vision algorithm that just snapping a picture of the stool can give you information about the stool in terms of consistency and color. We're going to be developing diet tracking via the latest techniques in natural language understanding, which is the best technique currently to do that. It's a hard problem. And for the rest of the information regarding sleep, exercise, and so forth, we plan on integrating with existing data sources provided through activity trackers. Second step is learn. Now that we have all that high quality information, we can model the relationship between the lifestyle choices and the GI symptoms. And finally, we can provide with those models actionable insights and then allow to share them with the providers.
And we estimate that the market for managing and monitoring GI symptoms is about $140 million in the US. The beachhead market here is about 12 million people. That effectively is folks, IBS patients that have severe or moderate IBS. And most of these patients fall between 25 and 54 years old. And there has been a trend that these patients have increased in their self-monitoring of these symptoms. We believe we can tackle that. Now, we have 2 hypotheses on how we can capitalize on this market. The first and primary one is going directly to the patient. We believe that patients will pay a nominal amount for an app that will help them reduce their symptoms. And once we create a critical mass amongst patients with IBS, we believe that payers, healthcare insurance companies, would be interested in paying for an app that helps reduce costs associated with IBS patients. So far, we have developed a prototype of the algorithm that objectively characterizes this tool, and we actually even submitted an abstract to DDW, Digestive Disease Week, for next year. We have received some grant funding from MIT Sandbox and have been accepted into the MIT Fuse Accelerator, which we'll be joining in January. We have done extensive preliminary research. We dove deep into the medical literature on this subject specifically, on how IBS management can be improved with better tools. And we now have actually recruited a team of students at Cornell Tech, where David goes to school, that over the next semester is going to be helping us develop the next iterations of the tools in terms of the computer vision algorithms as well as the NLP that we want to apply for diet tracking. Now, we want to focus on understanding the IBS patient. We need to talk to as many patients as we can. We've talked to patients in the single digits at the moment. We want to talk to patients in the 3 digits, meaning hundreds of patients, hopefully we can. So we're going to focus the next 2 months exclusively in trying to better understand not only the tools that they're using, that the IBS patients are using to manage their symptoms, but what it's like to live with IBS in itself and how we can help them. Thank you for the time.
So right now, I guess I'm trying to understand with the issue, the thing that you're most focused on is it the data collection from the patient that's annoying right now? I guess why is the AI helpful? Is it that it's more accurate or?
Sure. So the biggest problem we're solving is the fact that patients don't have, the current tools are ineffective, and there are studies published on this.
In what way? For what?
In reducing symptoms over time by providing insights into what triggers the symptoms, basically.
I guess I'm not super clear on like why they're ineffective and why your solution
Sure.
solves those problems.
So current tools, as we said, they don't provide good data because of subjectiveness and the high burden on the patient. And that leads to poor information, and most tools don't just give insights. They leave that for the provider to basically do a mental correlation analysis during the consultation time. So that doesn't work. And that leads to 77% in fact of dissatisfaction rates with provider visits in IBS patients. What we want to do is provide better insights, but to do that we need very good information to build those models. So that's why we have to build.
I would just, if you go back to the slide of like
Sure.
how it works and stuff, I feel like it needs maybe just a little bit more focus on what is the actual problem. Like,
Yep.
do you actually need AI? I mean, to train computer vision
So-
to look at stool? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
is that the biggest?
I can respond. Well, that's one issue because the symptoms are measured partly from the stool. There's other symptoms like abdominal pain or bloating that you can measure subjectively.
Right. I would believe
Yeah.
that if you said that the problem is that the current subjective, way that they're entering the information is inaccurate.
Yes,
At this percentage,
it is.
and the AI will.
So there are studies on the inaccuracy of patient reports. There's one study that found of 59 stools where compared the rating of the consistency between patients and physician and experts. Accuracy was 36%. 36% of the stools were correctly classified.
Okay, yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
that's the kind of data
So that's
that
good.
would make it more convincing of why this will.
Because it's a very long step, sure, we can probably include that information.
Good feedback.
Yeah, it's good feedback.
So how much money are you going to raise for the first phase of this?
So at the moment, so thankfully, we are students at the moment. I'm an MBA student here at Sloan. David is a computer science student at Cornell Tech, and we happen to have availability of 1,000 resources that are there for us. So we don't think we're going to be raising money in the immediate future. It happens that David is in a fantastic program that he, like everyone in his program, has to work for a startup that's been incubated in that, like started in that program. So we're exercising that benefit of getting. We have an engineer who's focused is exclusively in NLP, and an engineer who's going to be exclusively focused in developing the computer vision algorithm further, and a designer from a designing school, and even a lawyer who's going to join the team. So at the moment, we don't see the need for capital. Hopefully, we're going to be able to gain traction before we run out of free resources. But in the case that we would need to raise capital, we think that it'll be to sustain the technical resources that we're going to need to keep the data collection and the essentially dynamic system approximation.
So the $140
Shape.
million, that number that you had earlier, is
Yeah.
that
21
is
billion.
your market size?
Oh.
That's what we believe is the approximate market size. And that's based on,
So, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. Everybody's talking about billions of dollars of market size. It's $140 million, it's a small market size.
sure.
So whose idea was it to build IBS, and why IBS?
So, yeah, we can explain that. And this started, and other folks that heard us speak 6 months ago, they know that they see that this is a very different idea. We initially started with a technology that David has been working on using computer vision to characterize stool. And we initially thought that could be a data collection tool used in research purposes, because that's an endpoint used in a clinical trial setting as well as in research generally. So we're like, okay, let's move that data collection from subjectivity to objectivity. But it happened that as we talked to folks in that field, we didn't see the traction. But we happened to also engage with IBS patients because of the nature of the work we're doing. And we saw that there is a really important need there. They're emotionally attached to this, and they expressed their high interest in engaging with like an app. They literally, we've heard quotes of, if you develop something, let me know now, because I need it. So we're like, we'll explore.
Let me complement that just by saying very quickly that this can also be extended to other diseases. So IBS is one case of functional GI disorders. There's other varieties, but this is the biggest issue. It's also under diagnosed, so there is also the market we don't see. And on top of that, you have IBD, Crohn's, and other digestive disorders that also require the understanding on
How
how.
do you fight Apple? I mean, Apple is doing this. Apple is going to attack every single disease
Yeah.
with their iPhones and
Absolutely.
watches, right?
We believe that you need good data to fit in these models. If you feed garbage, which is subjective data, you have garbage in, garbage out, so you can't do that. We are developing the sensing aspect of the system to collect objective data. We're making a biomarker out of stool, basically.
So that was a part of the question, was what's the data that you're going to collect? Because obviously we know that AI is useless without good data.
Yeah. So, very good question. So we've already developed a prototype. We actually launched a few months ago a little app that allows people to send stool images anonymously. We work with 2 physicians at MGH who have labeled the data, and we've developed models on those images. Now, we have a very small data set. We need a lot more information to actually reach the accuracy that we want. We're confident that we don't need that much more data.
You also need more engagement with patients because you need to know what they've eaten or whatever, so that you can backtrack to obviously figure out what triggered it. You need a lot more information.
Well, we need to track lifestyle. We need to track symptoms. And we're doing both, right? We're doing symptom tracking through the stool imaging, and we're doing lifestyle tracking via the diet algorithms that we're going to develop, as well as all the other data that already exist through activity trackers, such as exercise, sleep, and so forth.
Do we have?
So I'd like to go back to Arvin's comment for a minute, because I think, $140 million market, I would really encourage you to start to try, if you can, to think bigger about what other extensions and where you might go. And let me explain the reason why. You're not going to get that whole 140 million. You're going to get a piece of it. So for a moment, suppose you got, 10%, 15%, whatever that is. This is not an inexpensive device to get to market. It's not the technical thing that's going to kill you. The fact is it's a consumer thing. So when you have consumer products, the cost to make the noise and get the buzz and get consumers aware of what you're trying to do out there, it's big. It's not just a matter of putting something out on Facebook or Twitter. It's big to gain awareness. So if you're going to have raise money to get to be able to do that, the way the formula works, just so you know, is that if you're going to raise for a moment $10 million or $15 million, okay, an investor's going to say, great, I expect a 10 times return. So they're going to expect to see $150 million. That says that you got to be minimum $300 million if they're going to have 50% of the company at exit for the investor to make money. And that's why you need these big markets, so that you can attract application stuff that will draw investment. And tied to that is a lot of times in this presentation you said, well, I believe, we believe.
Yes.
You got to do more than believe, okay? You really need to go in there, and it's not just the patients, because there's more stakeholders than the patients that control this thing. I mean, the first thing a patient does when they read something about, well, we got this new app for irritable bowel syndrome, first thing they're going to do is they're going to go to their doc and they're going to say, what do you think? Well, if the doc doesn't know anything about it, he's going to say, I don't know. He's not going to want to look stupid, right? So, you need to think about, well, what's the marketing plan for the doc, and how do I reach him, and how do I get to the conferences and show that this thing is really more effective than doing the manual thing. So there's a lot more that goes on. And I think what you really want to try and do is get as creative as you can about how you might be able to get this to be bigger, number one. And number two, to try and make sure you got a better shot at getting it right. Broaden your definition of the interviews to stakeholders, which would include docs, payers, the various insurance, the HMOs, the assistant, I forget what they call them now, the assistants that work with the doctors, because a lot of times now you don't even see a doctor, you see, a health professional. So you really ought to broaden out that definition of who your stakeholder is.
Thank you for that.
This is
I
really
just think
feedback.
like quick unsolicited advice, which is,
Yeah,
I
please.
feel like, I think it's awesome that you guys want to talk to the hundreds of IBS patients. I think it's totally something you should do and talk to other stakeholders as well. And I would just given your kind of story, I would just caution a little bit, just not to be too attached to the technology and to really keep an open mind about how to solve the problem in an MVP type of way. And it may not include machine vision. So just keep it open.
Let me just
That's one of the
comment
learnings.
on that. So one of the things we've learned through IDEA² is precisely that we started pushing the idea of computer vision for a stool from the beginning, and we hit a dead end where we couldn't justify. We were a solution in chase of a problem, basically. What we try to do, and I think what Alfonso was trying to depict earlier, is that we try to get rid of that for a moment and go back to the basics. That's why we dove a lot into the literature and figure out what the big problem is, which is reduction of symptoms,
Yeah. There's a lot of
not
low-hanging
the
fruit
capture,
out there that
exactly,
we need.
not capturing. So we're presenting what we hypothesize as to be the ideal solution because it fulfills all the problems. But you're right, we're not committed, we're not attached to a particular solution.
By the way, I'm sorry to do this.
That's okay.
When you do those interviews, okay, as I indicated earlier, make a one-page description with lots of mock screens in there that show a patient, this is what you're gonna get, okay? Maybe it's not 100% correct at this point, but take your best shot.
Yeah.
And that will give the responder a better opportunity to react to you.
Thank you for that.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you so much.